day to everyone. This is Massey and Morris. We are looking at the root cause of antinomianism that we are seeing. The root cause of rejecting law, the root cause of rejecting rules, the root cause. We learned that the devil was presenting this antinomian principle from the beginning, and Eve embraced it. Adam embraced it. And the children, humanity, have been embracing the rejection of God's rule, God's will, God's law ever since. And we see it coursing its way through history, through the children of Cain, and through the line of Nimrod. Nimrod, his bloodline, and his influences. We see the influences of Nimrod. But we also have seen law-keeping, law-abiding, following the rule of God, following the will of God, coursing its way through history, through the line of Abraham. So, my brothers and sisters, we are continuing in the root cause. The last time we were here, we were shown, and I'm showing it again for you on the screen, that the pagan priests of Dagon wore the fish mitre in honor of Nimrod, who they believe reincarnated as a giant fish in the sea. He's reincarnated in his son Tammuz. He's reincarnated as a giant fish in the sea. He's reincarnated. The papacy wears the same fish mitre, showing that they are a successor of Nimrod. Babylon, through the church embracing Roman concept and Roman ideas, walked right into the church. And the things that Babylon embraced, the church embraced. From Baal to the goddess of Sibyl, you see she's displaying the same thing. The priests of Dagon, to the most powerful priests on earth at this time. Where is Baal? Many people say, well, Baal has never been more popular than she is today. See, my brothers and sisters, and the church got into this because the church had to deal with sin. How would the church react to the breaking of the law? How would the church address sin? And the test of the early church would be, would you incorporate sin like the rest of the non-Jewish world, or would you eliminate it? And this test was so designed that the church had to choose between antinomianism and law-keeping, or what I would call nomianism. So while the ideas of nomianism had been present in the early church, and some Gnostic heretics believe that freedom from law meant freedom for license. The doctrine of antinomianism, however, grew out of the Protestant controversies on the law and the gospel, and was first attributed to Luther's collaborator, Johann Agricola. It also appeared in the Reformed branch of Protestantism. So, even the Gnostics would push and promote or proclaim this principle. The Gnostics would do it. And Paul would address the Gnostics in Romans chapter 6. He is addressing them in Romans chapter 6 and throughout his epistles. Because for the Gnostics, they believed that they could dispense with the law, that they did not have to keep the law. But after the Reformation and after the Protestant, during the Protestant Reformation, there was this figure I just found to be absolutely fascinating. His name is Johann Agricola. His original name was Johann Snyder. Now, Snyder, he was born in April 30th, 1494, and he died September 22nd, 1566. He was a Lutheran reformer, a friend of Martin Luther. He was a powerful advocate of Antinomianism, a view that asserts that Christians are freed by grace from the need to obey the Ten Commandment law. At Wittenberg, Agricola was persuaded by Luther to change his course of study from medicine to theology. Increasingly under Luther's influence, Agricola accompanied him as a recording secretary at his Leipzig debate in 1519 with the scholar Johann Eck and the Encyclopedia Britannica and the history books would display a lot of these records. In the year 1525, Agricola helped introduce Lutheranism, because I'm taking a lot of my quotes from Encyclopedia Britannica and other encyclopedias. As well, I'm taking my quotes from other historical books as well. So he helped introduce Lutheranism to Frankfurt, and in the same year became the head of the Latin school in Eisleben. He began to assert his antinomianism, condemning the law as an unnecessary carryover from the Old Testament and too similar to the Roman Catholic stress on good works. So he is rejecting the law. He's rejecting James. He believes that the law is unnecessary for salvation. It's too similar to the Roman Catholic influence on good works. That's what he's saying. The Decalogue, I'm quoting here, the Ten Commandments belongs to the courthouse, not in the pulpit, to the gallows with Moses. So he is dispensing with the law. Now the devil is finding a way for the law to be dispensed with. Different arguments, but the same end. He's shaping it and adapting it to suit each kind, each movement, each reformation. In 1827, he became more forceful, attacking the reformer Philippe Melanchthon. He's attacking Melanchthon, by the way, the right hand man of Martin Luther, an associate of Luther, for Lutheran inclusion of the law in Reformation theology. So Melanchthon is saying the law is indispensable. The law has to be related to salvation. The law cannot be eliminated from salvation. You cannot embrace salvation and still reject the law. Melanchthon is saying. The conflict was enlarged when Agricola returned to Wittenberg in 1536, and Luther responded with 5 disputations and treaties against antinomianism. So Luther encouraged him to change his course of study. Now Luther had to create or form or produce 5 disputations to address what Agricola is saying. So in 1540, Agricola went to Berlin, where he retracted his views, and in the same year was made court preacher by the Protestant prince Joachim in Badenburg. I'm probably butchering the name, but you can read it. This you can read it in your history book. Shortly afterward, he returned to Saxony, but found himself no longer in Luther's trust. Because Luther understood, even as Luther perhaps initially felt challenged with books like James. And he felt that James should not be in the canon. But even as Luther continued to to comprehend a broad understanding, a greater understanding of salvation, Luther understood that James was inspired, and James' emphasis on the law was necessary. In 1548, following Charles V's victory over the Protestants in his effort to unite the Holy Roman Empire, Agricola was selected by the emperor as one of the 3 theologians to draft a provisional religious settlement between Protestants and Roman Catholics, a document that became known as the Augsburg Interim. The Augsburg Interim. Interestingly, he is brought about or brought in with other Catholic theologians to draft this document. Of course, Charles V, sorry. Of course, Charles V, he understood that Agricola was nearer to his Roman Catholic position than was Martin Luther, than was Dan Melanchthon. And it's you find the same powerful Roman politicians promoting certain religious leaders and warring against others. You find it all the time. So in the challenge with Augustine and his rival, you would have the powerful political authorities throwing their weight behind Augustine and persecuting the followers of Augustine's rival. This merger of church and state to promote church doctrines, depending on the power of the state to promote and protect the church's creeds. So that's why in a few short years, because Agricola's concept and philosophy went through Protestantism, and that's why in a few short years, Protestantism needed another protest. And the protest would come from Arminianism. The Arminians were protesting the theological normalization of antinomianism. They are coming against it. Arminianism, a theological movement of Protestant Christianity that arose as a liberal reaction to the Calvinistic doctrine of predestination. But not only the Calvinistic doctrine of predestination, the whole concept of Calvinism. So Arminianism came on as a direct contradiction to Calvinism, and the Calvinists did not treat Arminians well. Persecution soon broke out. The movement began in the 17th century and asserted that God's sovereignty and human free will be compatible. So while the movement was named after Jacobus Arminius, that's a Dutch Reformed theologian of the University of Leiden, 1603 to 1609. While he was the face, he was not the only one. So he had this public debate with a rigid Calvinist concerning the Calvinist interpretation of divine decrees respecting election and reprobation. So for Arminius and the Arminians, what came to be known as the Arminians, God's will as unceasing love was the determinative initiator and arbiter of human destiny. The movement became known as Arminianism. So Arminianism, because of Arminianism and this movement, the Dutch had a synod. So the Dutch remonstrants were condemned at the synod. That's the what we now know them as the Arminians. So at the Synod of Dort, they were condemned and they suffered persecution for a time until 1630, when they were tolerated. Out of the Arminians, you would find Charles Wesley from 1707 to 1788, and the Wesleyan Holiness Movement. Wesleyan Holiness Movement will then move into the Methodists. And even though the Methodists, there's a major divide right now, the Wesleyan Holiness blossomed into the Methodists. But then these churches became nominal. The Presbyterian became nominal. The Methodists became nominal. Even Wesleyan Holiness became nominal. And you had another movement. It necessitated another movement coming to the fore called the Millerite movement. And the Millerite movement, they were Arminians. Many of them, leading figures. Their philosophy was Arminian philosophy. And that's why you had a harsh reaction. That was one of the reasons why you had a harsh reaction to Calvinism, from Calvinism. Calvinism, they did not only disagree with the 1260-year interpretation by William Miller, they disagreed with the salvation principles. And you see that disagreement with the salvation principles when you would find a Protestant preacher that became very close to William Miller and the Millerite movement. He is writing to the Presbyterian Synod. He's asking some questions. He's responding to them. So the Millerites, many of them Arminians, and they would believe that grace, that these 10 basic points as it relates to grace. Grace saves us, according to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8. Grace gives power to be victorious, and the text is there as we go through these quickly. Grace provides a power to deal with the sin problem. Grace is able to build you up and give inheritance. Grace was given to us before the world began. Grace is for obedience. Grace is for everlasting consolation and good hope. Grace teaches us. Grace makes service possible and gifted, and it positions you. Grace makes perfect in spite of weakness. So generally speaking, the Armenians believe that grace is an ennobling power, and grace can be abused, and grace is not a license to sin. So the 5 points of Calvinism, you would see on the screen is total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, perseverance of the saints. But the concept of Calvinism is such that the human being is so totally depraved that God would have to choose who would be saved, and he would have an arbitrary right to choose who would be lost. And while God chooses us, Arminianism says we must also choose God. For Calvin, God makes an arbitrary choice. And that's why predestination, Calvinism had to embrace predestination or some variations of predestination. Some Calvinists have rejected certain points of Calvinism, and they are called the 4-point Calvinists. Calvinists also believe in the Calvinism also embraces the unconditional election. So, election without conditions. You are elected by God without conditions. As you look through the 5 points of Calvinism, limited atonement, God did not die for the entire world. God, he died for a certain group of people. Irresistible grace. So when that certain group of people have accepted Jesus Christ, grace would always lead them and will ensure that once they are saved, they are always saved. The grace of God ensures that no matter where you turn, no matter where you go, you will inevitably come back to the point of salvation. Arminianism says grace is resistible. You can resist grace. And even though you are saved, you can be lost. The perseverance of the saints is similar to irresistible grace. That even though the saints may stray and may go astray and may do wrong things, the saints will inevitably return. Well, for Calvinism, the saints can be lost. So Calvinism asserts you are not so depraved that you cannot make a choice for God. They believe in human free will. Calvinism believes in human free will. They believe in conditional election, that election is conditioned upon a choice. So God chooses his people, but the people must choose God. They believe that there is a universal atonement, Arminianism, that God died for everyone, and everyone must make a choice, for God. And sometimes that choice would not be made, but they believe that everyone must make a choice for God. They believe that grace is resistible and people can fall from grace. So, and the natural successor, and while there are other Arminians, one of the main Armenian denominations in the world is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And who is the most influential Armenian in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Her name is Ellen G. White. So if you're going to build and advocate for building the church upon, for example, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, upon Calvinistic Calvinistic foundation, Ellen White is going to be a problem. She must be ruthlessly attacked. And she has been painted as evil, delusional, a heretic, all these kinds of things because she stands in the way of Calvinism. A powerful prophetic Armenian. So the war would continue. And you would find modern pastors would naturally end up, and you could forecast, once you see them heading in certain direction, you could forecast, you can say that they are building on certain foundations. When I hear certain points of view, once I hear certain positions, I know that they are going to have a problem with Ellen White because they are building their position on a Calvinistic foundation. Oh, my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, this is very important for us to understand. It's the reason why she's relentlessly, I say again, she's relentlessly attacked, and all kinds of conclusions, all kinds of accusations. And a lot of these quotes are out of context, but they are pulled from the air. They are being fished because she stands in the way of Calvinism. So you have people like Desmond Ford coming up. And Desmond Ford is seeking to build Adventism on Calvinism, and there are people standing in the way. One of them is Ellen G. White. We continue at a later time. My brothers and sisters, we are looking at antinomianism, against law. The law is obsolete. That kind of concept winding its way through history. This is Pastor Ian Morris. We meet again as we continue with the root